talk a little bit about making maple syrup to start with. You can see the buckets hanging on the trees. Those were the buckets that were used 20 to 50 years ago. The tops kept the rainwater out of the sap when it rained, and it always rains when it warms up a little bit in the spring. So some farmers said, I think we can do better than having to boil all that water. So they come up with those buckets. I didn't look at these yet, so I'm going to join them together. So tell you how to tap the trees. First off, you pick your trees out and you get a drill ready, and you got to drill in about 1.5 inches to get into the sap wood. And then you put a spile in it, which hammers into the tree, and you hook that somehow to a bucket. All our buckets, where we have buckets this year, sit on the ground, and then we put plastic cover over them.
What size drill is that, 1/2 inch?
Well, Kevin come up with some new taps this year. They're only 5/16 of an inch in diameter. And the guys at the maple syrup place said that's what you want to use. It's easier on the trees than the big ones. The bigger ones used to use a 7/16 drill. You collect the sap, which is this year. We haven't collected much. We've collected twice as all. We're hoping that after today it warms up a little bit more tomorrow, and it will run some. Then you see what it takes. You got to have buckets. You got to have candy thermometers. You got to have a lot of time, because mostly it's just time. And I tell everybody that this year we got a raise. We went from 5 cents an hour to $7 or 7.5 cents, because that's a big raise, you know. When you get into where we make the syrup, you stand around and you learn a lot of useless information. But I've got some pictures of the way we started. You got to boil the sap. It takes 40 gallons of sap to make a gallon of syrup. When it starts, towards the tail end of the run, it takes maybe 52 gallons of sap to make a gallon of syrup. That's a lot of boiling. And this last showed you filtering. We've got cone filters. The one filter is felt. The other filter is they call them paper filters. They're not paper, but they look like they are. We filter out of our evaporator through that, and we dump that. When it gets filtered, we dump that into a bottler. We filter it again out of the bottler after we warm it up, put it back in again. We filter it one more time, and put it back in, and then we bottle it, trying to get all the sugar sand out of it that we can. We have 2 places where we have tubing. Dick Rice has a whole lot of maple trees in his front yard, and we run tubing from all but I think 6 trees into big tanks, and then we come along and when it's collecting time with a 12-volt pump, and we pump it into our travel tank. Our boiler looks a lot like that evaporator, and our sugar house doesn't look like that. Sap runs in the sapwood inside, and like I said, you got to get about 1.5 inches in to get to the sapwood.
Which layers is it between the sap runs?
The tap runs in the sapwood. That's inside, about that far inside the tree. You go through the bark, and then you go through the first layer, and then you get into the sapwood.
Between the cambium and
The hardwood you can see is inside. There's nothing in the hardwood. Sapwood is probably what they're calling the cambium. No, it's not. And the flow of sap in the maple trees is depending on temperature. Once the temperature gets up above 32 degrees, that sapwood kind of wakes up, and positive pressure develops from within the wood and causes that wood to flow out of the roots up into the branches. And we're catching it while it's still down in the main trunk before it gets to the sapwood. Ideally, it runs between 40 degrees in the morning, gets up to 20 degrees in the morning, gets up to 40 degrees in the day. If the wind blows, those trees don't like anybody to take their sap. So they don't, if the wind blows hard, no very much sap runs out. once that freeze-thaw cycle ankle ends, the buds break dormancy. And when the buds break dormancy and grow, we stop. Because there's no sugar coming in that sap flow anymore. Last year, we only gathered sap 2 different times. And it warmed up and the buds come out and we were done. So that hole is where the tap was. By this time next year, that hole will fill itself in. They used to take plugs out there and they'd pound them in. When I started making syrup with my 2 uncles at my grandma's house. And they always, when we pull them taps, we tap a plug in there. And one day a guy was out. He said, "What are you doing, Harvey?" I said, "Well, I'm plugging them holes up." He says, "No." He says, "Pull them back out of there." He says, "That tree will cure itself. Next year you won't be able to see where that hole was." So those maple trees are smarter than a lot of people. The maple trees, the leaves grow opposite each other. That's the only tree that grows that way. All the other trees, there's a leaf and then down leaf and then back over leaf. But the maple trees, they're 2 in a bunch, but right across from each other. Well, not the only ones. The dogwood and horse chestnut do it too.
You gotta take ash off the list until those hybrids.
At my house this year, we got 2 red maples tapped. We got 8 silver maples, and we got 1 hard maple. I don't know what it is, but my brother-in-law brought them up 20 years ago, and we planted them, and now they're big enough. They got to be at least 10 inches in diameter before you tap them.
Are any of the maples better for tapping than the others?
The hard ones have a little bit more sugar than the silver and the soft maples. But Uncle Harry always told me, "Well, we can't make syrup out of soft maples. It just frosts in the pan, and you don't ever get any." Till one year we tapped all my trees and they were all soft maples, and we made syrup. Well, that next spring I said, "We're gonna tap my trees again and we're gonna make syrup again." I said, "I don't know whoever told you we're gonna make syrup out of it, but."
What actually creates the sugar in the roots?
God. I have no idea. The nutrients in the fall, when that all runs back into the ground, and that must bring the sugar that's left in the tree back down there. It stores it in the roots, and then in the spring, it brings it back up again. That's one of
To get the leaves.
those mysterious things that God does for us. The sugar maple is what they mostly like out in Vermont. Red maple, we can't tell the difference in my 2 red maples, whether there's more sugar or not. You put your finger in them, you can just taste a little sugar in the sap. Norway maple, and Kathy said this morning, "Well, you said there weren't any maple trees in Europe," and I said, "That's what I've been told." And she says, "Well, why isn't one that's called Norway maple?" Maybe because of Norway immigrants come over here, and they planted one and we'll call it a Norway maple.
They are invasive, non-native.
Are they?
Yeah, and they, the other maples, they just drop all their seeds in the spring. And, because the animals aren't hibernating at that time, so they're like, but Norway maples, they still drop them in the fall.
Do they?
Yep.
Increasing fuel costs and time taken to make the syrup, you can't really make any money doing it, but we're not doing it to make money anyway. And when we get into it a little bit, I'll tell you how we're saving money.
So here, if we were blessed with all those sugar maples and red maples, we have about twice the sugar concentration. So half the sap to get the same amount of syrup. That's why the commercial guys tend to avoid the yard trees, right? There's a sentiment that these are junk trees over here on the right from a pristine syrup maker, right?
Purist likes to.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that, but 40 gallons, that number you hear, 40 gallons to make a gallon of syrup, that's when you have the very best trees. Most other folks are somewhere around 50 gallons starting, right? And we'll get into a little bit later, that's an extra this many hours of boiling just because of the trees that are available to you, right? So we can't pick our trees necessarily, right, but we can pick our process to get us to kind of reduce the amount of time, and that's, Dad made that, I didn't know I'd make it 7.5 cents, that's really nice. But it is a joke, right? You don't make money doing this, but you sure spend your time.
It breaks up the winter. You get to see people that have been in house all winter long.
Yeah.
We got 12 people that work with us. So we all make enough syrup that everybody gets some, and if we got any left, then we sell it. This is where the maple trees in America are, all the way up in Maine, from all the way down Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, a little bit in Illinois. Canada has way more maple trees than America does. But the main place is up in Vermont. They make the most syrup in America.
So that brown picture, if you go page up a minute, right? Who makes the syrup?
Which one?
We said Vermont is blessed with all those trees, right?
Yeah.
The page down, right there. Small print, you can't see it. Vermont, in the year that this was current, 3 million gallons of syrup.
Amazing.
3 million.
Wow.
And Michigan turned in 200 and change, Wisconsin had 300, right? And I was looking at this and I thought, divided by, our best year ever, I think we said 100 gallons.
99 and a half, yeah.
We made more than North Dakota. Gotcha.
That's kind of important.
But there are blocks of maple woods out there that aren't being tapped.
Probably. We should
Yeah, I
probably
mean,
package
it's
stuff up
just a
and
matter
get
of
it.
getting out and doing it.
Yeah. And I clipped off the far side. So Oregon makes 100 gallons and Washington makes 100 gallons. But it really is, this is Vermont's game
Right.
Yeah.
and Canada, right?
Yeah.
Is
If
there
you
such
go
a
through
thing as
Vermont
taking too much
in the
syrup
fall,
off a tree or
it's gorgeous.
stuff it to them?
Red,
Too much
yellow
syrup.
leaves for
Yeah.
miles and miles and miles and miles when you're in Vermont. We were out there 10 years ago when we went through it.
Dan, Sue had a question, is there such a thing as taking too much sap
Out of the
Does
tree.
it
out of
harm
the
the
tree? Does it
tree?
harm them? I heard for my whole life, those trees will make as much as you take.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then I did a little research, University of Vermont, Cornell, did a lot of studying. And they've tested this all the way down to, you take a 3 or 4 year old sugar maple sapling and it branches, right? They lop half that tree off, they put a bag and a vacuum on it. They pull and they pull and they pull and they pull and they pull, and those trees haven't died yet.
wow.
Wow.
Which gets you to, think of apple trees are now apple trees in a
Teeny
row.
little,
Yeah.
yeah.
You could get to a row
Oh,
of stunted maples, haul on vacuum pumps, and you won't need the big maple woods, you won't need all the square footage.
Oh, that's so sad.
But Canada
Yeah.
won't allow that.
Especially sugar maples.
wow.
I don't think you guys would have much fun doing it that way.
Can't hide behind that tree.
Sounds like that meat they're growing in the.
Yeah, meat piece.
This, Kevin came home one night, said, Dad, I have a stainless steel pan, about 4 foot by 3 foot, I want you to put some handles on it, 4. So we can pick it up and dump it where me and Mike Mauer are gonna make maple syrup. And I thought to myself, this will be interesting. So I put the handles on the pan and got that done, and I said, well, let's take it out where you're gonna do it. We got to Mike Mauer's, I think we got a picture in here of that. Don't we, Kevin?
There you go.
There, that's where it was. Had a sand floor, had a roof over it. That was it. No walls. But when we got out there, I said, well, where's the arch that this pan's gonna sit on? Oh, we're just gonna set it in the fire. Oh, I said, well, that won't work. So we got some cement blocks around and we made an arch. You can see the bottom, you can see the cement blocks that pan's sitting on. And we used that for 3 years, and then the heat disintegrated the blocks. After the third year, they just fell apart, so. The next over here in this corner is the arch that we made. And by that time, we had metal on the walls. That first winter, it was cold. And we had the blue tarps, we'd pull them up and try to slow the air down. But Darrell Wilson and I were out there one night, we got way behind, and it was about 10 degrees below zero with the wind blowing. Finally, Darrell says, I'm freezing. I went out in my truck and I found an extra pair of bibs, threw on him, and I brought in a couple of blankets. We're right up against the back of that arch. We'll huddle up like that, shivering. But. So then we talked Mike into getting some metal. We put metal on it. That helps a lot. That you can see the big pan is up there. Now this corner shows our new evaporator pan that we bought after we had a series of pans, and I bought an old evaporator system that was 40 years old. And we used it 2 years, and we'd use it for a couple, 3 days and would get a hole in it. So we'd shut it down, take it off, patch it up, and finally at the last time I said there's nothing left to patch. And so we bought that new system. And just after we got it in there, Mauer said, well, I sold the farm, we're gonna have to move. So now we got this brand new evaporator pan going, and we kicked around where that was gonna go. Finally, we ended up going down to my Uncle Harvey's on Rector, about a quarter mile south of where Mike was on Grange, and cleaned up an old wood shop that he had, and insulated it, and that's where we've been making it ever since. Arch, that's an arch we built. It's got, the walls are insulated and there's fire brick inside it. And that's how hot the fire is. You open them doors and you gotta step back because it's really warm. That was still inside of Mike's place when that picture was taken. We use wood. Dale Young works with us, and he cuts trees down in the summer. And he'll get a good tree and he'll bring it over, and we cut it up and then we split it. And that's what we fire with is firewood. Usually it's maple, sometimes we get an oak. As far as having to buy wood, we don't. That's a little savings for us.
Is the rest of the expense electricity or something? What's the rest of the expense?
Well, jugs, we put it in, the pints, of course, the glass jugs, they're expensive. We were heating, when I get to where we're doing it now, we were heating it at night after we shut down with electric heater, and the electricity bill went. One of the ladies that I'm related to said, that's really expensive. Not my wife, the other lady back there. But this year I put in a hanging gas furnace. We run gas out of there from the house, and we've got that down. But the most expense was the filters and the jugs and the time, which you can't charge for the time. We bought 2 electric pumps that we use in the building, and then we got 2 12-volt pumps that we use when we gather. And we got 3 places that we have pipelines on that they put it in big tanks, and then we go out and we just pump it into the tank on our pickup. So those last about 3 years, and they're pretty well wore out. There's a lot of sand in the sap. The sap looks just like clear water, but there's sand in it you can't see until you boil it down and it gets brown, then you can see it. But it chews those impellers right up in those pumps. Pretty quick, they just sitting there screaming, not pumping anything, so.
Doug, did you say you had 12 guys roughly that were?
Yeah.
And of those 12 guys, a number of them probably have an area where they're tapping trees?
Yeah. Dave Barr and his brother Jared, if you know them from school,
Yep.
They both got trees on south of 13 Mile Road over by Algoma offices. And then we come back to Dig Rice's on Rector by High Lake. That's where one of our pipelines is. He has, I've never counted the trees, a lot of them. We go down back to the 13 mile road to a driveway, goes down by Low Lake, that's where Ken Erickson and Nancy live. We tap trees there with pipelines. Bob Shangles, a couple years ago, said, well, I got 20 acres north of Camp Lake, and I got a lot of maples, we'll tap those. So we tap those. And then we tapped some at my house this year and some at my neighbor's. But I gathered and cornered them up last night, and I said to Kevin, we got 12? And he said, no, we don't have 12. I said, yes, we do. So, and everybody, last year, everybody got 2 gallons. It looks like maybe this year, if we don't get any more run, I'm gonna cut it down to 1. Because we do have some good customers that we've been selling syrup to Tom at his bakery for, what, 12 years? I guess.
Well, that was your syrup.
Doug,
Yeah.
you mentioned the wood you burn for the fuel. Is there a reason why you don't use any variety of?
Well, because mostly what Dale's been cutting, have been either maple or it's been oak.
Would you burn anything, or do some
Well,
things not burn too fast?
You
or
don't,
dirty,
you don't
or-
get a lot of heat out of pine and it doesn't stay there.
Yeah, it's probably
You
dirty.
fill it up.
Go for wood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, about every 10 minutes, we have to throw more of that split wood into there. With pine tree, it would be about every 5 minutes. You just
Okay.
get them closed every time you put them in again, so.
Got it.
Maple lasts quite a while and oak does too.
Okay.
Do you cook eggs in your syrup?
No. When we were making syrup with Uncle Harvey and Uncle Harry, they threw chicken, hot dogs, kielbasa, sausage, potatoes in a syrup can. And one day I said, why? Uncle Harry said, well, because it's hot. So when we started, the first thing I said to Kevin, we're not cooking anything in that syrup except syrup. And so far, I've never seen anybody throw anything in there, but
Well, my brother-in-law had one, they had a separate pan that they cooked
off to
eggs
the
in.
side, yeah, that'd be okay, but not the pan.
Not,
you
yeah,
don't
right.
allow.
Yeah, not your open pan.
Maple syrup with chicken grease in it isn't all that great.
It does permeate the shell.
Yeah. This is our new place. It was full of everything when we started. And when we decided to go, Kevin and I went down there and we started throwing stuff out. Got it down to the cement floor. Didn't have any inside walls in it. So we insulated it, and we put windows in it, and then we put plywood on it, and then everything got painted white. We made that hood above it to catch most of the steam, and that's that new evaporator pan that made it a whole lot better to making syrup. That's our wood. We usually have to fill that up maybe twice a day. And that's stacked around outside in the other half of the pole barn. I'm there giving directions to Dale Young.
How much time do you feel that evaporator pan has saved you from when you started when you were young?
Oh, that probably cut our boil time by 1/3. And then Kevin bought that little thing. That's a RO unit that you use to make purified liquid. And we run our sap through that and pull about half the water out of it. We've cut our boil time by more than half by doing that. We take it from 2-3% sugar. The last that he did this past Saturday, it was up to 8% sugar.
Wow.
And it wasn't in the pan very long, and it was time to pull it off again. So we've had that 3 years.
2022, we decided to either kill each other or.
There was a lot of discussion went on, we don't need to do that, blah, 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 blah,
So
so.
that, there was a picture of that big square tank, those big orchard tanks, right? When Yeah, that tank holds 300 gallons. Right, so you say that's a lot of syrup. You said 300 divided by, 50, that's 6 gallons of finished syrup. That's a lot of quarts. That's true. You gotta boil all that off, right? And we can only boil 12 gallons an hour through that machine. So 300 divided by 12 hours of boiling for that tank. And in that day that we bought this machine, we had 3 of those tanks full. And it's sweet water exposed to the air, so it picks up yeast and it starts to ferment and it gets cloudy and it loses its quality, so there's a shelf life on that stuff. So the decision was throw away all that good sap because we couldn't boil it, or find some way other than boiling to separate the water from the sugar. And I've been looking at these things from the sugar supply houses, way fancier. Of course they would have to be, right? $5,000. And I said, that's the end of that. And then I found Facebook Marketplace. There was a guy over in Rockford that made that one. $600 worth of parts, and he skinned me for more than that when I bought it. And we brought it back that day, and we watched it take that 300 gallons down to 75 in about 5 hours.
Wow, that's really fast.
You can't touch that with boiling, right? So since then, all we've had to do is get faster inside the sugar shack. So if you're boiling at a certain rate, your behaviors are at a certain rate, right? And now you go and you say, I said we could boil about 12 gallons an hour, right? If we get that sap up to 8% on that right-hand graph, it's only 10.7 gallons required to boil off to make a gallon. 4 times as fast that syrup's coming off that machine,
Wow.
right? And Dad said we filter and filter and filter. You gotta wash those filters.
Yeah.
You gotta get out of your chair, right? And you gotta have hot water, and you gotta get, right? So that first 2022, there were arguments, right? About, we're not running it as fast as we can, we're still gonna lose that sap. Well, I do this and I do that. I said, I know all that. We're changing things. Right? So 2022 and 23 were bumpy. But now we just this weekend, what did we have, Dad? We had 3 1/4 in the tank plus 75.
Yeah.
We pushed 400 gallons
400
through that
gallons.
rig.
Wow.
Right? And it was a
Yeah.
12-hour day. 12-hour day
Yeah,
was
it was.
hard work. Right? And we had a dedicated fireman. We had somebody on the, it's time to pull and filtering and all that. And then we had a dedicated filter washer, and so 4 of us. A 4-man crew, most of 12 hours. And we had auxiliary cooks. So what did we make out of that? Say we made, say it was 10 gallons finished syrup in 12 hours, right? And if you forgive all the cost, right? We sell our syrup at $64 a gallon. So that was a $640 day for 4 people, right? Then you can just see it doesn't scale. It's not a money-making hobby deal.
Yeah, but it's
If
fun.
you get on the internet and you look up Vermont commercial maple syrup operations, there's a family that taps 3 mountains. And they quit counting taps after 6,000.
Oh, wow.
Right? And they do all that tubing, and they use gravity and vacuums, and they move their sap in fire trucks. And their boiler is 20 feet long, and it's fired by fuel oil. And their reverse osmosis room has hundreds of those tubes,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
And they can put that syrup on the street at $32 a gallon
Wow.
and still call it
Wow.
a pretty
It's
good
still a
deal.
profit.
So it's all that automation.
That's amazing.
So we don't watch that video very often.
Doug, would you say the smell of burning maple syrup is a negative thing?
Yes.
Do you run into that occasionally, or?
When we were still making syrup with Uncle Harry, he was a fireman. And he'd fire till 10 o'clock at night, and then he'd sit there for an hour and a half, let the fire go down, then he'd go out and go to bed. Well, one night at 10 o'clock, he opened the doors, fire was going full tilt, he said, it'll be okay. He went up and went to bed, and it burned. There were about probably close to 30 gallons in the 2 pans we had, and it scorched it right to the pan.
Ah.
They bottled it, took it to Emmett Market, Louis sold it. Within 3 days, everything they got sold came back and said, this is not good. So Uncle Harv went in there, we loaded it on his pickup and took it back out and dumped it in the Maple Woods. And they said, Uncle Harry, we gotta wash the pans. Nothing wrong with the pan.
Oh.
They continued making syrup until the season was over. Never sold another jug of it. Nobody wanted it. It tasted terrible. It tasted burned.
Yeah.
So we watch it pretty close. We run our pan, the front pan we run about 1.25 inches deep. The back pan, there's fins go down that far, so it's that deep there and then about that much above the top of them. And we keep that, we got floats that keep it at that level. So we haven't scorched any with the new pan. That's a hydrometer. You can't see the red line, but there's a red line just above the top of that, where my fingers are. That's at 32 on a brick scale. That's where it has to be in order to sell it in Michigan. We get it to that point where this thing is not right into the pan. When it gets just below 7, it's at that 32 place. That's where we pull it off and put it in the bottler. That's the bottler on the bottom going through those filters again. And we put 4 or 5 dumps in there. That gets us 4 gallons or maybe a little more. And then we heat it up. We go back and drain it through the filters in that big pan or big bucket we got. Dump it back in through their filter it one more time and put a clean filter in that top and then put it in there one more time. And then it's ready to bottle. Yes, sir.
Nobody likes too much government interference, I don't think, but is there like an FDA or someone, or is anyone coming, knocking on the door saying, hey, you're selling
Nobody
this?
has. We have to put on our stuff that we sell is made in a non-inspected facility.
Okay.
But in all the facilities I've ever been in, this one is right to the top. When we made it so that it's, and we keep it clean. That'll hold about 10 gallons of syrup, which 2 people can't pick up a double. So we try to get it maybe a couple gallons in there. So.
Is there an advantage to using stainless over copper?
Yes. Copper you could burn right through the fire we put on that.
Oh, okay.
Copper would never hold it. They make pans out of English steel, same thing. That'll burn through if you have too hot a fire. The stainless will stand it better.
That metal firebox that we showed you in an earlier picture, it had, I don't know, fairly heavy galvanized. You used to hold
16
the fire
gauge,
brick in
yeah.
place.
Yeah.
We burned that metal up.
Yeah.
Right now the fire bricks are loose. We got to put new metal in. The stainless that sits on top of it is just fine.
What kind of temperatures are you talking about?
Probably pushing a couple thousand. It's just, those coals are just red hot. Those are the 12-ounce bottles that we fill and sell. That's my cousin Brian bottled them. We have a thermometer on that bottling system. I took an old propane grill, threw everything out, left the burner in there. That's how we heat that bottler up. We got quarts and we got pints and we got 12 volt. One guy wanted a gallon, so we bought 4-gallon bottles and we still got 3 of them.
All those lids have a temperature sensitive seal. So that's why one of the reasons you have to bottle hot is to get that seal to activate. And then after that, they say that it's an indefinite shelf life. Right? And then when you open it, you want to refrigerate it. And every now and again, you may see a little skin on top. and you can reheat it and take that skin off and you're right back to good syrup again.
It never spoils.
What
This-
label is yours? How do I know if I bought syrup that came from you guys? Does
Well,
it
would
just
either
say
come
Pinckney's?
from our hands, or if you were at the
Go to Tom's
baker
Bakery.
at Tom's Bakery, it'll have my name and.
Your name's right on it?
Yeah, that's one of the things it's gotta have,
Some-
if we sell it, it's gotta have Kevin's name on it. This is the picture there is that back pan of our evaporator. And those three things across there, they're about that long and they're down, way down, so all the air coming from the fire goes across those on both sides. That's what makes that back pan boil faster. That gets rid of a lot of the water.
Creates a draft?
Huh?
Creates a draft?
Yeah. Yeah, it pulls that out. You hold a tissue down in the bottom, it'll take that right out of your fingers when that's burning.
If you go up a few pages to where we have the firebox showing,
Back,
page up, PGUP, so that firebox, let's say it's 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot, right? That's a lot of volume of fire. As soon as you go back to maybe at 2 foot 6 inches, so in a 6 inch, if you're standing in front of the fire, 6 inches farther away, there's a ramp. And that ramp leaves a ½ inch. For all that fire that is 2 foot square, it's reduced to a ½ inch by 2 feet, right? And that front pan is flat, it's got a flat bottom. That back pan doesn't have a flat bottom, it's extruded. So there's high spots and low spots and high spots and low spots. That's what Dad was showing you in that other picture. The fire goes up into that pan because it has no other option. So they got a ½ inch until it hits those extrusions. So there's live fire inside the confines of that back pan. And that's how you get that 80% of the water drives off in that back pan because of that extrusion and that sucking that fire right up.
Wow.
And we build it for parts that we had, right? We reduced that whole fire down to a 6 inch diameter pipe.
Yeah.
The design of this thing says nothing smaller than 10 inches. So even with 6 inches, Dad was saying if you hold the tissue in front of it and suck it in,
Yeah.
it could be even more with that 10 inch pipe. But 10 inch
Exactly.
pipe doesn't do good on 7.5 cents an hour paychecks. You can just scratch out 6 inch pipe.
That's good.
So is it continuous flow then, or is it by the batch?
we have up where that white pipe goes up and over, that PVC, that's a stainless steel pan that holds 11 gallons. And that pumps into there. On the side of the back pan, there's a float. When it needs juice, the float opens up and it comes out of there. And when it gets down to where it's out of that pan on the wall, we have another float in there that tells a 12 volt or 120 volt pump to pump more stuff across. When this all started, it was go with 2 5-gallon buckets and get it out to the 300-gallon totes. You carry it across and put it back in there, and then little by little throw it in those pans. We're sitting there one night, and I said to Kevin, there's gotta be a better way. So we bought one 110 volt pump, one of our Mike Mowers, and run a line across, and Mark Allen built us that float that was in there, built us a control panel for it. So that then we didn't have to go over there and bring it was there.
So the syrup itself, when it's cold, right, it's all at the same density. It'll fill whatever space you give it. As soon as you start heating it, it separates into more dense versus less dense. It creates a push, right? So that back pan has channels in it. And you can watch wherever that raw syrup comes in, you can see a flow start, and that flow continues right into that front pan. And if you don't mind the heat and the steam, you can look at that front pan where that fella is, and you can see a lighter color goes to a darker color, goes to a darker color, goes to darkest, right? So there is a flow, and you can pull small batches of finished syrup off if you're careful without breaking the boil, which is the goal. You never want to break that boil. So if you watch other sugar houses, right, they might have a program that says every 7 minutes throw firewood in, and every 7 minutes pull a quart of finished syrup off. And they'd be real regimented, right? So that they're maximizing their boil and their flow. We don't quite take it to that extreme. We take the amount of syrup off that we can lift, like Dad said, in that tall canister, balanced by how often do you want to wash those filters. And it's a practical question.
Exactly.
Because we ran our sprint and got 400 gallons through 4 guys, 12 hours. Somewhere in there that stopped being any fun. Right? And some days you're 3 guys, so it's not going to be a great production day. But the other thing, you're always balanced again. How old is that sap sitting in the other side? How close to getting cloudy and losing its value? So there's always a push. Right? It's just how big of a push.
More questions?
I have one, it's not really a question. I work with Alpine Historical, and we've been doing a maple syrup test every year for the last 14 years. And it's coming up the 4th Sunday in April at 2 to 4 in the afternoon at the Alpine Fire Barn. And like I say, the person that won last year, he just did it in his kitchen. But we do a double blind test, so nobody knows whose syrup is whose. They go 1 to 10 on color, 1 to 100 on taste, and it's up to the judges how they. And then we have a person that adds up all the scores, and they go from that. But we usually have around 10 sugar shacks in it every year, if you're interested.
Yes, sir.
Doug, what has been your longest season and what has been your shortest season?
Last year was our shortest season. We gathered twice and then the trees budded. Our longest season, I don't know how many days, I think we were pushing 40 maybe. And we made 99 and a half gallons of syrup that year.
Couldn't get to 100.
Couldn't get to 100, that we ran out of sacks. When my grandma and grandpa moved out to that farm in 1918, grandpa had a cast iron cauldron that held about 30 gallons. And he made a tripod out of old iron that he found there. And he set that over the fire. And grandma sat out in the woods 8 hours a day throwing sticks in that fire to make syrup. And when grandpa got home from work, he worked at the town at Extensal. And when he got home at night, then they dip it out of that cauldron, take it up the house and finish it up there. So we came quite a ways since that point. I don't know any other things that I could tell you. Like I said, it's just something to do. When we started it, it was something to break the monotony of winter up. When it got going a ways, when we got to Mike Mauer's and we finally got that arch built and got a couple of good pans, and we got sites shut in so we wouldn't freeze to death, then it got to be fun. And we've always pretty much had 12 people. Cousin Brian Longcourt was down. He started making syrup with Uncle Harv and Harry too. So I think I was about 10 years old when I started with them. We're open. We come down to take 13 Mile Road to Grange, go down a quarter mile, half mile, director, turn right, go about 100 yards, and there's a little white house with a pole barn. If you see steam coming, we're there working. So you're welcome to come out.
Are you looking for any more trees this year?
If they're
Big enough?
Yeah.
I think I got 5 on my thing.
Yeah? You've done the tap? Okay. Probably not this year.
Yeah, it's in the
Question, do you notice a difference in the taste from year to year at all, or pretty much the same
We got a customer up by Sand Lake that bought from us, and one year we didn't have any give to her. So she bought from somebody up there. And she called my cousin Brian up. She says, next year you can't run out of syrup. Your syrup tastes a whole lot better than what we bought.
Wow.
So, if you get it up to the 16 brick line on that, that's where it has to be. The Amish don't have to follow the state rules. They put a spoon in and turn it up, yeah, that's sheeting off the spoon, that's fire enough. But it's got a lot of water in it.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Thank you, Sue, for putting this all together. Thank you, Doug. And if you don't